AP today. Did you have any other questions about the financial reporter? That's kind of where we left off the other day. Are you pretty good with that, you think, for now?
I think so until we make some changes to it or,
Okay, yep. All right.
yeah, it's easy,
So,
it's easy to find those reports that we need and
yeah. So, perfect. Okay, so one thing I wanted to go over that we sort of touched on at the end yesterday, but I want to make sure you guys understand it. I'm going to review the finder for you. So any indexed field is going to have this little magnifying glass on it. And that is your finder. You can access it by pressing function key F5 or by clicking on the little magnifying glass. So when you first do this, what it's going to do is it's just going to show you the list. And of course, you can always scroll around until you find what you want. But you can also do a search. So usually people like to search on a description. Your two options for that are contains or starts with. So, for example, if you're looking for a vendor and you can't remember what the vendor name is, you're probably going to want to use contain because you might, there might be a the or something, and you
Hey,
might not
Carol,
really. Yeah.
can you share your screen just so we can
Oh,
see
for
what you're looking
God's
at?
sake. Oh, for heaven's sake. Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it?
Thanks.
Yeah. I thought I had
I'm
done
thinking,
that.
wow, she thinks we really,
Oh, you guys are that good. Let's see. Share content, share screen. Yep, that would help. Okay, so now you can see my pink saves 300 now. Yes?
yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go over the Finder. Okay. So once again, you can access that by clicking on the F5 function key on your keyboard or just clicking on the magnifying glass. And I think my Finder is actually up. Let's see. What is going on? Here we are. Yeah, so when it first comes up, it's just going to show you the list, okay? Which, you might be able to find it by doing that, but most people like to do a search. So if I want to look at a description that contains sales, just for example, what it's going to do is it's going to pull up everything that has the word sales in it, okay? Now, if you are need to look up something and that field does not exist in any of these columns, you can actually customize this finder. So if you click on settings and then you go to columns, you can see on the right, you're going to see all the fields that are listed. So account number, description status, blah, blah, blah. On the left, you're going to see all the fields that you could search on. Okay. So you can simply click on a field that's of interest and click include. You can also move that field up if you want, so you can really organize the finder however is going to be useful for you guys. And by the way, any settings changes that you make will not impact John, and John's will not impact Felicia. So don't ever hesitate to make changes thinking, well, John's not going to want to see this, but I might. It is saved with the user. Okay. So
Good to
now
know.
so if I click OK, now I can see my account segment is now listed. Okay. And that's for every single field in Sage that has a magnifying glass. You can customize those settings. Those customizations are saved to the user for that company. So if there's a certain way you want to see it, you're going to need to do it in all the companies that are active. So anyway, you can just tell it my description contains, and then you type in the text. So if I type bank, I'm going to get all my bank accounts and bank charges. Okay.
Okay,
So that's the finder, customizing the finder. Okay.
nice.
Yeah, it's a handy thing. There are also some other fields that you can customize like that, and I'll show you that as we get in, because AP has a really good example of one that you might want to customize. So we're going to go to AP today, and like I always do, we're going to start with AP setup. Okay. So we're going to go to AP setup options. So all your name and address reads in from your company profile. Okay, so you don't have to type that in every time. If you were a larger organization and you had a different AP contact, you could put that person's name in here. But I think it'll all be the same for you guys, because you're not dealing with like an accounting department of 50 or something like that. The next tab is the processing tab. So it shows functional currency, your single currency company, and you can be really glad about that. So that's dimmed. Once you set that, you set it and it's set. Processing option, forced listing of all batches. Again, I find that a really annoying thing to have checked because once again, just like GL, you can't post unless you print if you turn that option on. I personally find that annoying. So I have a couple people that like it, but most people don't. Allow edit of imported batches. You're probably not importing anything, but if you did, you'd be able to edit those batches. Allow edit of external batches. You don't have any of those either. An external batch would be like if you had the purchase order program and you recorded a purchase and then you receive your items and then you record the vendor invoice and then that vendor invoice gets pushed into AP. You don't have that. Okay. Retainage accounting is for construction, might have been helpful for the hotels, but certainly not for Sky Asset Management and the foundation. Retainage is where you might hold back 10% of your payables for vendors who have retainage, and but you're not doing that. So again, that's not going to apply. It's checked in sample data, but you won't have it checked in your setup. These are your default aging periods. You can change them if you want. 30, 60, 90 is typical. Vendor and group statistics, absolutely, you want to keep statistics. Allow edit of statistics again with a small organization. That's not really going to be a concern, and you're probably not ever going to edit your statistics. That's more like if you were starting a new company and you wanted to put some year-to-date statistics in there. And then your choices are to accumulate by fiscal year, calendar year. For you guys, it's going to be the same. And for period type, again, it's probably going to be fiscal period, but you could do weekly, 7 days, bi-weekly, 4-weekly, monthly, etc. Fiscal is probably what you want. So the next thing is how things appear in your aging. So when you print out an age payables, if you have credit notes or unapplied payments, these two options here, typically those are aged as current, so it wouldn't really make sense to show a 90-day past due credit note. I mean, but it's up to you. You can do it by date or just put it all in the current tab, and we'll look at that when we print an aging. And then you can store vendor comments, and then this is just the default number of days to keep them. You would clear them in periodic processing. Okay. The next tab is transactions. So we have more choices. So default posting dates. So in Sage, you've got 2 dates. We talked about this briefly yesterday in the GL, but it's going to become more relevant in AP. So your document date is going to be whatever is on the front of your invoice. Your posting date is going to dictate when it hits the general ledger. Generally speaking, that's going to be the same, but if you had something that you want to push off into the next fiscal period or the next fiscal year, your posting date might be different than your document date. Tax amount and tax base, you're not tracking sales tax and accounts payable. That's more often seen in, for example, Canada, where you might get your provincial sales tax back. So you're going to want to track that so you can file and get that refund. Not here. Once sales tax are paid, they're paid. So you don't see that as often here in the US. 1099 CPRS recording. 1099 is, of course, for vendors who are non-employee contractors that need 1099s. CPRS is the Canadian equivalent. They're treated in Sage very similarly. So when you see CPRS, just know that that's the Canadian equivalent. Allow edit of 1099 amounts. Probably you want this because if you forget to turn a vendor on as 1099 and do it after the fact, you're going to want to edit his year-to-date 1099 amounts so it's correct. Default 1099 amount. What that means is it's going to default that the total of your invoice is also going to populate that 1099 field for those vendors who are subject to 1099s. Default detailed tax class to 1. That is, again, for tracking sales tax, which, if you ever want to do it, let me know, but I doubt it, honestly. So these are your invoice options for invoice batches. Below is payment options. So you have 4 kinds of payment transactions in Sage. The first one is payment, where you've got an invoice, you've entered it, now you're going to pay it. The next type is prepayment, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're sending someone a down payment on some service or product you're getting. Apply document is where you have maybe a credit note or unapplied payment that you want to apply. And then miscellaneous payment is where you are paying something that is not yet accrued in AP. So I've never run into anyone who had default transaction type as prepayment or apply document. Usually it's payment, occasionally it's miscellaneous, and we'll talk about the differences when we get into transactions. So default, remember we're in payment options. So default order of open documents. This shows how your documents are going to be sorted in the AP payment screen. So you can sort it by document number, or maybe you want document date. You could have it like descending by the balance. Usually people do either document number or document date. So that's that default. Default bank code. What bank code in Sage do I usually use when I'm paying bills? Okay, so that's your default bank. What is my default payment code? Check, or it might be ACH or wire or something like that. Most people, it is still check. And then check for duplicate checks. So what that means is if you put in the same check number twice, it can either ignore it, in which case you would say none, issue you a warning, hey, are you sure? Or give you an error, which would prevent you from doing it. Most people do a warning. So sort checks by transaction entry number, vendor number, payee name, country, or postcode. So again, most people do it by entry number. So if you have a batch of 10 checks, you're going to see what's about to be paid in entry number order. Okay. Default posting date, again, document date. Typically, that is what you want. So it could also be batch date. It could be session date. So session date is that date when we logged in earlier. We talked about that yesterday. My session date is the date I use when I log in. Include pending transactions. So payments and adjustments is probably what you want. So what that means is if you've got an unposted batch against a pending transaction is an unposted transaction. So if you've paid a vendor invoice, you want to know about that. You want to see that as a pending, and that's going to prevent you from accidentally trying to pay it twice. Allow adjustments in payment batches. That allows you to modify the amount of an invoice while you're paying it. So say there was a mistake on the invoice, you entered it in as 100, it should have been 95. You can make that adjustment at the time rather than doing a separate adjustment and posting it. You can do it all at once. System generated batches are where you go into the system and you generate a payment batch based on what's due. We'll look at that. You probably do want to be able to edit that in case, you create a payment batch and you're like, you know what, I want to actually pay that one next week. That's usually turned on. Allow remit to information to be changed. So your remit to information is usually going to be your vendor name. But if you've got a situation where the remit to is not the vendor name, maybe you're sending it to a lockbox or something like that, you can actually set up and have a remit to, which is separate from the vendor name. Okay. Numbering, this dictates your auto numbering for transactions. So in accounts payable, the only things that can be auto numbered are recurring payables, payments, prepayments, and adjustment invoices. You're just going to put in whatever invoice number your vendor gives you. It also allows you to modify the length in case you don't want 22 with leading zeros. You can make it 15, so it's a little less unwieldy. And then you can have a prefix. So RP for recurring payable, PY for payment, etc. And then this is not editable, but it just tells you when is my next invoice batch, what's my next payment. It's just tracked here. Retainage tab you will not have because you do not hold retainage for your vendors. Okay.
Hey, Carol.
Yeah.
I've got a system question, and maybe it might be too early for this, but we'll ask it now. So my understanding is our current bill pay system is basically somebody goes to Berlin, says we need to cut this check, XYZ. Berlin cuts the check. I believe in the process goes into Sage, posts that check to AP, and then post it to the GL. Is that typically how it works, Carol?
It can be, and we'll talk about that when we get to GL integration. You might want to actually change that.
Okay.
Sage is a batch system. So, you enter your invoices as a batch, your journal entries are a batch, your payments, checks are a batch, adjustments, everything's batch. So when you post that batch, it's going to generate a batch in the general ledger. And then you would either let it auto post, which I'm going to show you, or you would go in and post it. And we'll talk about that very soon because I have my own opinion on what's best practices. But obviously it's going to be up to you how you want to handle that.
So my old company, we used QuickBooks Online. It was pretty basic. But for AP, we used Bill.com, right? And so everything flowed via, we had an AP email distro, and every vendor sent their invoices there. Bill.com automatically pulled those invoices and all the pertinent information into Bill.com. Then we would, we had a series of reviews. Once everything was approved, it was auto paid that night, and then it connected into QuickBooks and kind of had all the GL info, so it automatically posted. Is that an option with Sage?
I'm not sure if there's a hook. Last time I checked, there wasn't, but I can reach out and see if I have a couple clients that use Bill.com, and they just manually enter the stuff into Sage. So, and I don't love that simply because, it's two things that you're doing. You can certainly add a piece onto Sage called EFT processing which is electronic funds transfer processing. And what that will do for you is it'll allow you to create that ACH file based on your bank specifications, upload it, and then, your vendors get updated, as well as the payment goes from your bank to the vendor. So if that would be of interest, so you can get away from some of the paper checks, we can certainly look at that.
Yeah,
And I can see it. Go ahead.
That's a step in the right direction. I think there were two things about the Bill.com setup I really liked. First, we didn't pay anything by check, which we've had some issues recently paying things by check. So I think we're all kind of in the boat of liking to get away with that. Like, I'd like to do everything ACH if possible. And then even Bill.com, like, you could send wires, ACHs, you could pay, but you could do anything in Bill.com and integrate it with both our bank and with QuickBooks, so we could pull the funds. We could also post to the GL. The other thing was the automation, right? There was no uploading into the GL system. It was just all completely automated. Either of those, are there products out within Sage that allow us to do either of those?
Well, the auto post to the GL, yes. You just have to turn it on. And I personally am a fan of that. I know a lot of people like to check their batches from AP before you post into GL, and I don't recommend that because you really shouldn't change anything. If you hit the wrong expense, that's best served by just using a journal entry to move it from expense A to expense B. You want your flow from AP to GL not to be, you want it to be the same, in other words. So yeah. And that also saves you the aggravation of, oh yeah, I forgot to post that GL batch. No wonder my AP doesn't tie, just as an example. So yeah, that is turned on. I'll just show it to you now. And GL integration. So you've got GL integration, handles anything coming from any subledger in Sage. That would include accounts payable, accounts receivable, bank services in your case. So down here, create GL transaction during posting or on request. On request is kind of left over, in my opinion, from DOS, where it just accumulates until you tell it to go to the GL. I cannot see why anyone would want that, but whatever. And then the next one is create GL transaction by. So your choices are adding to an existing batch, which would mean if you have an AP batch sitting out there that's not posted, it'll add to it. Second option is creating a new batch, which I like because I personally like one AP batch, one GL batch, that 1-to-1, which makes it easier to kind of see, did something get lost here or what? But my favorite option is creating and posting a new batch. So when you post your AP invoice, your AP payments, your adjustments, it'll post into AP. It'll update your vendors. It'll also create a GL batch and post it. And everything will be posted unless it finds an error or something like that. The next option is consolidate. I hate consolidation because you lose your drill down, and that's left over again from DOS when you had a 20 gigabyte or 20 megabyte hard drive, and you had to really worry about running out of space. And so we would consolidate transactions to keep things leaner. There's no reason for that today. And again, you lose a lot of your detail. Personally, if I want to see my debits and credits in GL exactly as they show up in AP, so I can drill all the way down and check out what it was if I need to. So you can set that in AP integration. in all of your companies if it's not done yet. Felicia, are you still posting the batch as you get it, or?
Yes, and I gotta be honest, Carol, Berlin will do batches, like when she does like like distribution checks for the family or whatever. She will do that in a batch. But honestly, I like to see everything. When I go into the transactions listing, and I'm looking for something, I don't want to go through each batch. I like to just see everything there. So I'm not doing batches.
What do you mean you're not doing batches? I'm confused.
I'm not entering things. If this is what you're talking about, when we say I have 6 checks to the same vendor. No, that's not a good example.
6 invoices for one vendor?
Yes, maybe. But I don't enter those as a batch. I enter each one individually so I can look back and see, okay, this is for this.
Well, okay, so let's I think we're mixing our terminology here. When I say a batch, it means everything in Sage is batch. So if I'm looking at my AP transaction, my invoice batch list, there may be one entry, there may be 30, there may be, any number. So this is one batch, 11 entries. Okay.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. I guess I'm talking about the entries then.
Yeah. So, most people, so if I send you an invoice this week and then I send you another invoice next week, that's going to be 2 entries. It may be in one batch, it may be in 2, doesn't matter. But you're going to see invoice number 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to see invoice number 4, 5, 6 showing up, in your AP and your GL. So, everything is batch, so I'm not really, so are you talking about where you say, I send you an invoice for $200 and another one for 100? Are you talking about if you entered it as one transaction for $300 where you're combining them? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, no.
So different thing.
No, a batch is just a collection of entries entered at once. Okay. So here's batch number 21. It's got 11 entries. It may be to 11 vendors. It may be 11 invoices to the same vendor, but each one is a separate transaction. That way, if someone calls you and says, I never received payment for invoice 1, 2, 3, you want to be able to look in that vendor's history and see, oh, we never got 1, 2, 3. If you combine a bunch of invoices into one entry, then it's all lumped together.
And that's what I don't like.
Yeah, I don't like that either. I wouldn't recommend that either. So, yeah, a batch is just a collection of entries. It can be to one vendor. It can be to 101. Just depends on how many entries, you have. Typically, people will enter their AP, every couple days. I might get 4 or 5 invoices today. I might get 15 tomorrow. That would be entered separately. Yeah, the old theory of, oh, well, I don't want to use up my entry, you're not going to run out. So there's no reason to lump them all together. And you kind of lose an audit trail by doing that, in my opinion. So when I'm talking about the general ledger integration, so this is one batch for 11 entries for $28,000. So I should see a corresponding general ledger batch that has those 11 entries for $28,000. Okay. Series of debits and credits. So, yeah. So make sure in your GL integration, okay, I'm glad we're having this conversation. Make sure in your GL integration and all your companies that do not consolidate is turned on, okay? Because if you're consolidating, then what you're just going to see is a series of entries to expenses and then one lump sum in AP, and you're not going to know what all that is. So I hate consolidation because I'm a big fan of audit trails. I don't want my stuff lumped together. It does make for a bigger database, but I think you get better information that way. So I'm not sure if I'm exactly answering your question, but my recommendation to people is that you choose create transactions during posting and then create GL transactions by creating and posting a new batch and do not consolidate. That's my preference. Because again, you get a much better audit trail than if you see some big lump sum in there. Does that make sense?
Yes, I don't think we've ever had that problem, so we must be set correctly.
Yeah. So the only thing you might not have set is the creating and posting, because your Sage has been hanging out for a long time, and that creating and auto posting was added at some point. So if some of your companies don't have that, it's probably because the feature came out after you guys were already up and running, you know. Yep. But yeah, it just saves you a step. Yeah, I just think it's good. So remember we talked about source code last time. So this is
Sorry,
where
Carol,
these, yeah,
before we move on from that, I just want to make sure I understand the flow, how all this works. So as it stands now, our system is set to create GL transactions by creating a new batch. So
okay.
what that means, correct me where I'm wrong. Let's say we have a batch with 3 invoices for 3 vendors. We're going to post that right now to our AP system. It's going to go to AP aging, and it's going to post to an expense account.
Well, it's going to create journal entries in a GL batch, but it will not be posted until you physically go in and post it.
So then we have to go into the GL and actually go. So those are created. We just need to go post them in the GL.
Correct. Yep.
So can you show me in the GL module where we would go post those?
Absolutely. So let's actually let's I'm going to change my setting here. Okay. So I'm going to create an entry in AP transactions, invoice batch list. I'm going to create, well, I've got one that's ready to post. So I'm just going to go ahead and post this guy right here. So I've set it ready to post. I'm going to hit post. And then it tells me invoice posting sequence 26 was completed. It doesn't have any errors. It would tell me if it did. GL transaction creation completed. So that was $477. So now I'm going to go into the general ledger. Where is it? GL, here it is. GL transactions, batch list. And here it is. Okay. I'm going to scroll to the right. And there's my $477. So now I'm going to set that one ready to post, and I'm going to hit post. Okay. And that's done. All right. So now the other alternative is creating and posting a new batch. So I have to close. You can't change certain things in setup if you've got AP windows open. So let me close that. Right now I should be able to save it. Okay, hold on. Got too much open. So let me close that. So I'm going to go back to AP setup. And I'm going to go to my GL integration. This talks about how AP and the GL talk. Posting, save. All right. Now I'm going to go back to that AP batch and I'm going to find another one to post. So I'm going to uncheck show posted and deleted. Okay, so I have this one here. I'm going to post it. Okay, I have a feeling I've got errors. It's probably because of my fiscal period, but it did create that batch in the general ledger and it attempted to post it. So let's see what's going on there. So there's my AP batch. So it probably doesn't like the fact that the date was 2025 or something like that. But anyway, it's created the batch. It tried to post it. It'll let you know if there are errors. Okay. So again, my preference is to create and post. It saves you a step, and that's always worthwhile. Now, the only time that can become an issue is at the end of the year, you have to make sure before you start posting 2026 transactions, you got to make sure you've created fiscal 2026 in common services, and you have to make sure you've run create new year in the general ledger. And somehow we didn't actually talk about that yesterday. So that is the year-end process that you do in late December. So that's done. I'll talk about it now under periodic processing, create new year, and you just click process and it rolls your current year to the next year and allows you to start posting. You can see my current year is 2021. It's about to change it to 2022. So that's why those 2025 transactions didn't post. It makes sense. So when you create your new year in the GL, it does a couple things. It does create a retained earnings entry for all your revenue and expense accounts. And I have a document on this, which I'll send you. It also creates the fields to hold the new year. Okay. So a lot of people think that they can't create new year until their audit is done. That's absolutely not true. It does create a retained earnings, but if your auditors give you subsequent JEs, post audit, then you can still go back to the old year and post them. It'll update your retained earnings, your opening balances, and then you're good to go. So I recommend people create their new year in early or late December, mid to late December, and then you're ready to go for the new year. And while you can still, of course, work in the old year because it is a multi-year system. Does that clear up the GL integration question?
It does. So last question on that. Why would people set it up so it doesn't automatically post to the GL?
Because they have the idea that they need to review everything before it posts, which I get that. However, if it's coming from AP, you want it to hit the GL just like it was entered in the AP. If you find out after the fact that you hit internet expense instead of telephone expense, you can just make a journal entry to move those expenses. So that's really the only reason. So some people have it set up, quite honestly, because they've been using Sage forever. That feature was added at some point and they never turned it on. Other people are like, oh no, I can't post to the GL until I've checked everything. So my feeling is that you should be able to, at any point in the month, not just at the end of the month, but any time, you should be able to go and look at what my AP balance is in the general ledger and compare that to my AP aging at any time, not just on the 30th or the 31st, but any time in the month. And so by doing the auto post, your general ledger is always up to date and in sync with your sub ledgers. So, in my opinion, there's no reason.
Okay, well, we do manually, if I'm not mistaken. And we post it. That's just a part of the process when we do it, when we pay a bill, when we pay an invoice. So, and that's another reason for that is at the end of the year, because we will enter invoices and write checks and just not post to the GL until Berlene's finished with her year-end posting.
Not necessary. Not necessary.
I mean, if everything automatically posts, that's going to screw things up, isn't it?
Nope, not at all. Sage 300 is a multi-year system. That means you can post into any prior year that you want. So yesterday we talked about we talked about, let's see, where's my GL? Here it is. In our GL setup, we talked about the ability to post to prior years. That's on the posting tab, allow posting to previous years. So if you create your new year on, say, December 20th, so that you're ready to rock and roll for the new year, that does not mean that Berlin can't finish up 2025. Okay. There is no, that whole hold the GL open until is leftover from DOS. It's 100% not necessary.
Okay.
In fact, it's so unnecessary that I recommend against it. That's, yeah, honestly, it's just holdover, and the habit that people have gotten into, that, oh, I can't post for the new year until my old year is finished. Well, that means that you're waiting until what, April, because if you're going through an audit, it's going to be, well into the new year before that's finished. And then, you go in and you start, you have 50 batches to post in each company. I mean, it's like, and you gain nothing,
Okay.
So,
We're not that big, so we don't have that issue. It's maybe
right.
5 or 10 for,
Yeah, but still,
whatever.
there's just no reason. There's no
Okay.
reason. Yeah.
And again, it's probably just leftover from,
It's
20 some
leftover.
years ago.
Yep, it is. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you guys used to use the DOS version because you guys were already up and running when I started working with you.
Yeah.
But if you did, then yeah, you had to wait.
Yeah.
You had to wait, and you had to let those subledgers accumulate until you finished, and it might be mid-February before you finish posting, because you're wrapping things up and whatnot. But yeah, no, you don't have to do that, because in Sage, if you recall, we looked at a journal entry. I'll just pick one. So you got your year period. Notice this is a 2019 batch, because remember the sample data is based on 2020. So this is a prior year. This is considered a prior year, but it'll post. It's going to update the retained earnings, your opening retained earnings based on these revenue and expense accounts that are impacted by this posting. So, yeah, I mean, my recommendation is post everything. Now, the one thing about auto posting, if you have not run Create New Year in the general ledger and you enter a handful of AP transactions for 2026, they're going to roll over into an error batch because the GL is going to try to post a 2026, but it'll be like, hey, I don't have 2026 yet.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons that when they designed Sage, I think, they didn't call this year-end closing. They just call it Create New Year. Okay. So does it create a retained earnings entry? Yes. But the main thing it's doing, it's creating the new year. So, you're starting with zeros in your revenue and expense accounts. You're not it's not just closing the year. Your year is closed once you lock down that fiscal period. So, once you say, yep, everything's posted and the tax returns are done, I'm going to lock down 2025 and move on. But there's no reason to, in a true multi-year pro system, to be holding things open, for the new year. So, and that's all covered and explained in my document that I wrote. So I'm going to send that to you for your review. But
Okay.
yeah, that's just, kind of old, leftover from the days when you just didn't have a choice. Yeah, you just sort of were stuck and you had to, but now.
Well, yeah.
And the nice thing about this is you might not be done with 2025 and it's January 28th or 30th or whatever, and you might want a preliminary income statement for January. Well, if you're holding your GL open and not posting, you're not going to be able to get that. So, I mean, Remember, Sage, we said it can hold up to 99 years. That means you could go back 50 years if you've got, if your data's been around that long. Not that anyone's has, but yeah, so there's really just no need to do that.
I'm sorry, guys, but I have to step out and call Jim for a second.
Okay.
All right, so I'll be right back.
Tell him my husband says hello.
I sure will. Will.
Okay. So we'll carry on.
I'm sorry. Yep, go ahead.
No worries. Okay, so that was our AP setup options and our AP GL integration. The next icon is account sets, and this is what designates your GL account for accounts payable. So you can have multiple accounts payable. Most people have one. You probably just have one. But this tells what is going to be credited when you enter an AP invoice. So what is my AP control account? And then what is my default for discounts, my liability for prepayments, and we don't have retainage, so you won't have that field. So that's all the account sets are doing, is they're creating that other side of your entry where you're going to debit some expense, you're going to credit accounts payable, okay? 1099 codes come with the system, and you would assign these to a vendor for those that require 1099s, and then when you post a check to that vendor, the 1099 amount will be updated, okay? Distribution codes are optional, but what they are is they're kind of GL shortcuts. So if you'd rather type Amex, for instance, than account 1021, I mean, that's what a distribution code does. Not most people don't do them in AP, but you could if you wanted to. Distribution sets could be useful. A distribution set is where you've got a collection of GL accounts. So say you've got American Express and you always hit hotel and you always hit travel and you always hit parking and maybe meals, and there's just a handful of accounts that are mostly always going to be hit when you pay that bill. You can set that up as a distribution set, and it just facilitates quicker data entry. Okay, it's optional.
That would be very helpful.
Okay, I'll show you that in action. Yep. So terms, of course, it's exactly what it sounds like. That's your payment terms for accounts payable. You can have just about any kind of terms you want. So this example is 2 net 30. Turn my phone off. So this would be 2% 10 days, net 30 days. So 100% due is in 30 days, but I get a 2% discount if I pay in 10 days. So that's how you set up your terms. You guys have your terms already set up. They've been set up for years, but this is where if you had a new terms that you wanted to set up, you could. There's also COD. Somebody is being very persistent. 100% due is due in 0 days. You can have a due table. I've yet to find a client that actually used this. But a due table would be if the invoice date is between the 1st and the 10th, then it's due on the 15th. If it's between the 11th and the 20th, it's due on the 25th. If it's between the 20th, 21st and 31st, you add a month and it's due the next month on the 5th. Again, I'm sure somebody's used this, but so be aware, Sage can handle multiple due date situations. Net 30, 100% due in 30 days, no discount. Here is 60-day multiple payments example. In this example, 60% is due in 30 days, 40% is due in 60 days. And in this example, they have a 2% discount if you pay early for both of those payments. So the advantage of doing multiple payments, if that is the terms of your vendor invoice, is it's going to age appropriately. So if you just manually say, well, I'm going to pay half of it now and the rest in 90 days, it's going to show that remaining half is past due. But this way, it'll handle that. Again, don't know if you guys have that, but the point being, pretty much any kind of terms you can imagine, you can probably do in Sage. Okay. Payment codes. So again, this comes with the system. So check, obviously, check is your most common one. We might get away from that. ACH, Visa, whatever. Okay. So these are just your kinds of payment codes that are used, in your system. If you ended up implementing an EFT system, electronic funds transfer, we'd add one for EFT, when you set that up. I don't know why people would really email their vendors, but you could. And this would be just a generic example of an email, that you might send to vendors. Okay. GL integration, we talked about this pretty extensively. So this dictates what happens when you post and how it hits the GL down in this section. Your AP source codes are defined here. Remember, we talked about those yesterday. So these are the defaults. You could change them if you wanted. And then your transactions, this is a rather intimidating looking screen, but this dictates what lands in your GL. So if you wanted always in the GL reference field to have the vendor number and the vendor name, or if you wanted in the description to always have your document type and your document number, that's where you set that up. Okay. So it handles both sides of the transactions. So as you know, an invoice is a debit, probably to some expense, and then a credit to AP. So this part, invoice, debit note, credit note, that's always going to be the control account side. So what happens to the AP account? The detail dictates what shows up in your expense account. So if you ever are looking at a printout of the general ledger and you're thinking, why isn't the vendor name there, or why isn't something else there, let me know and we can set that up. Okay. Does that make sense, Felicia?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So that's basically, this icon is telling the system how AP is going to integrate the GL, what fields are being sent, when are things showing up in the GL? Are they posting? And then, just your source codes, which are the defaults usually. Okay. Payment selection codes. This is for system check runs. So payment selection codes, you should probably have at least one called all or all vendors or something like that. It tells us what bank you're using to pay your AP. And then what is my criteria? Select by due date. You can also restrict. So if you end up doing EFT, you might want to do one payment selection code that's for your checks and another one that would be for your EFT. So you can run them as separate, batches of payment transactions. Okay. And then you can exclude certain things like, I don't want to pay ADSS Global or something like that. If you want, you can do that. Optional fields, again, whether that shows up in an AP payment, probably not for you guys, because I think your optional fields are only in your foundation. Once again, optional fields and AP setup. This shows what optional fields are assigned to what things. So vendors and vendor groups, remit to locations, invoices. So in your case, you would have donor in the foundation. This is where you could tell the system that it was required if you wanted. Now, if you do set that as required, then you're going to have a donor selection that's none, because otherwise you're going to have to assign a donor to every single invoice. So just keep that in mind. If you turn that on, you're going to have to probably, because I'm guessing the foundation pays some other things except donor things, or is that not the case?
They have other invoices
Other
that they pay,
expenses.
monthly Verizon bill or whatever.
Gotcha.
So
Okay, so
they do.
yeah, you'd probably need to create a donor code called none, so that you didn't get an error. Because if you say it's required and then you don't pick Megan or John or Jim or whoever, then it's going to throw an error. So you'd want that none for those invoices.
We probably already have that, Carol, because I mean that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, but is it required? That's my question. Does it force you to put in? So that's just something to think about. If you want to make it required, just make sure you have an NA or a none or something like that for those non-donation payments. Okay. And then you could also have the default set as none. But that kind of defeats, in my opinion, the required if you put a default in there. So anyway, something to think about.
Yep.
All right, so that's AP setup. Once you have filled in all your AP setup, now when you guys do a new company, I import most of this stuff. Not the GL integration. That's not importable, and the options aren't importable, but everything else is. Then the next thing you do is we set up our vendors. So you can set up, the first thing you have to do is create a vendor group. You have to have at least one, but you can have as many as you want. So vendor groups set up certain defaults for your vendors. So you probably have one called all or something like that. It tells us what account set is being used, what is the default terms, what is the bank that you pay the vendors from, and what is your default payment code, like check or something else. And then you can set defaults for invoicing. Usually people don't do this because your expenses are going to be all over the map. So anyway, and then your duplicate invoice checking, do you want it to give you a warning? Do you want to give you, or what, or none? Optional fields once again, and then statistics. So this just says in 2020, here's what I did with this vendor group. Okay. So that's that. Once you've created your vendor groups, you can then create vendors. So, of course, we have vendor number. Vendor group is required. Once you create a vendor, it's going to populate certain defaults like the account set and some of those things that you set with that vendor group. Okay. And then name and address, phone number, contact. Okay, you can have multiple contacts. That's a new feature that showed up in Sage a few versions ago. So if you need vendor contacts more than one, okay, you can create additional contacts. So create new contact. So I'll just say 1200 JD. And it's Drescher, John, and then that vendor's contact email and whatnot. And now you can see I have a new contact for that vendor. Okay. Processing. So account set, this all comes from your vendor groups, but you can override it at this point. So if most of your vendors are net 30 and your vendor group is net 30, but this vendor gives you a discount, you can change it to 2% 10 days net 30. What bank code do you use to pay? What payment code, check or EFT if you implement that. Check language, English. You could do it in French if you wanted. And then delivery method, that's less important in AP. It's more, delivery method comes more into play for AR when you're emailing invoices to your or to your customers, but you can also do it in AP. Invoicing, here are my defaults. How do I want to distribute by? Usually it's going to be GL account, but it could also be that distribution set that we talked about, or a distribution code, or no default. And then this is my default. Usually when I pay this company, it's accounting and legal fees. Of course, when I enter an invoice, I can override that at that time. Is this a 1099 vendor? So your three options are none, which would be no. 1099, CPRS, you'll never have because you're not in Canada. If they are a 1099able vendor, you want to put their tax ID in here. You want to identify what kind of tax ID it is. So the only two legitimate options for US are social and employer ID. GST, business number, social insurance is all Canada, so don't use it, okay? What kind of 1099s do they get? So non-employee compensation or whatever. If a vendor is a social security, the IRS requires that you put in their first name and last name as well. So if you do the online filing of 1099s, that needs to feed into there. So I actually asked Sage to put this in because people used to have to do it manually. And then what is my filing state? It's Maryland always, okay? Do you guys do many 1099s?
We, there are enough. And that's one of the things that Berlin does.
Okay.
John, we need to get with her so we can see. She gathers information and then sends it to Gorfine's office, and Gorfine's office spits out the 1099s for us.
Okay.
So, so
you can do it inside of Sage. You just
I think some of it. Yeah, I think some of it she does do inside of Sage, but there's other stuff that she doesn't. So
yeah, there's a product called Atrix, which is now bundled into Sage 300. And I'm gonna just turn off my phone. My God, people are calling me today. There's a product inside of Sage 300 called Atrix, and it's an online filing service. So at the end of the year, you make sure your 1099 info, you review it, make sure it looks good, make sure you've got all of this stuff filled out correctly. And then you go in, you file it, and it uploads it electronically. It'll mail the whole thing out for you. So you might want to look at that. That might be cheaper than having your CPAs do it at whatever rate they're charging, So I have some stuff on my YouTube on filing 1099, so you might want to just take a look at that. Okay. So yeah. Anyway, you're going to see something here called notes on the right. So you can see we've got a whole lot of vendor 1200 test notes. I can create another one. Here is another test. Okay. It's attached to this vendor created by my user ID. I can make it active on specific dates or just always. Cannot be dismissed or can be dismissed, and save. And here's my note. Okay. So you can put little notes inside your vendors if you want, just to store additional information that you might want to store in your system. Optional fields, this is probably where you're going to see in the foundation donor. Okay. I think that's the only optional field we've got for you guys. But as you can see from this example, there are a lot of examples here. So if there's any additional information that you wish you could store in Sage, let me know. We can probably create an optional field for that. Okay. Statistics, pretty simple. Your year and your total invoices, total payment, how many payment total, and then you've got some statistics for the whole year down here, so that just accumulates every time you post in Sage. It adds to this number. The activity, this is another statistical field, shows the outstanding balance. If there's a prepayment sitting out there, you won't have retainage, and then it has things like the highest balance you've had and that kind of thing. Average days to pay, so sample data is not doing too well. 1,200 days to pay. And then comments is just another place to store additional information for your vendor. Okay. And that's vendors. So I'm going to go ahead and save. I don't know if I made a change, but just in case. So remit to locations. I talked about this earlier. If you have maybe a lockbox or some alternate place where you're sending your money, you can set that up here. Okay. You can tell the system whether it's your primary remit to. I don't know if that's something you'll need, but if you do, it's a good thing to have. Okay. Vendor activity. So this is a good feature right here. So if you're looking for something in your vendor, you can see my credit limit, my outstanding balance, if there's a prepayment, so the statistical info, last payment, last invoice. It'll show your aging based on whatever date you choose. And then transactions, what's outstanding. I'm going to maximize this screen. So this shows the most important, in my opinion, the most important fields are the invoice number, the original amount, what's been applied, is there a current balance. So in Sage 300 and any of these grids, which look like spreadsheets, right? You can rearrange these columns. Once again, this change will only apply to your user ID for this company, okay? So I can grab this and I can say, well, I actually want to see this over here because that just makes more sense to me. Current balance. Here's my invoice number, if there's a PO, etc. While I'm on this screen, if I want to look something up, so I'm going to look this one up here. I'm just going to click document. And it's going to take me to my original invoice entry screen where you can see,
Nice.
what it was. Yeah. Did you know about that, Alicia?
I did not know about that. I use this, I'm in here, but I only go to the payments usually.
Gotcha.
On the previous one to see if we've already paid an invoice, or it's just a quicker way to just to check and see if something's already paid.
Yep. So here's
I
another
did not
one.
know this.
Yep. So looking at this one that has some money applied to it, So if I click open, it's going to show me, all right, here's the original amount, the applied amount. It's got a balance of 13 cents. Here's what's been applied, this payment in May for 500, and then this payment in June for 853. So you can get like the whole history of this particular document by clicking open. Okay. Clicking details shows me, it's kind of a mini view of the invoice entry. So it shows the document number. If you put in a description, the date, the posting date, the original amount, what's outstanding, So it kind of drills into that. If there are optional fields, you can click on that and you can see, oh, that was a donation by John, for example. Okay. Again, you can rearrange these fields. Let's see. So on the payments tab, again, here are all my payments for this. I can order by means sort by. So I can sort by check number, document date, whichever makes more sense. And then I hit this thingy, which is the universal go. If you've got a lot of vendor history, you might say order by document date, but start on January 1st, 2025. So you're not looking at, 10 or 15 years of stuff. Then when you click on a document, let's click on this one. If I hit document, once again, it's going to show me what was paid. So these two invoices were paid, and the status is outstanding. This one was reversed. So this is going to show you the status that you've got for that check in the bank rec. Okay. So that's a good place to go if a vendor calls you. So if they're calling about invoice number 123, your probably best bet is to look for invoice 123 in the document transactions tab. Just because it might be easier to find that way. Okay. And then the payments tab. So that is that. Once again, let's just say you always want to sort by date and you're sick of having to make that choice every time you come in the screen, you can click on setting and then choose save settings as default. That way, next time you open this screen, it's going to order by document date, for example. Okay. If you've got 10 or 15 years of history, you might actually only want to go back a few years. So you could say order by document date started, say January 1st, 2023. So you're only slogging through 2 years instead of 20. Since you guys have been using Sage for quite a while. So once again, that's settings, save settings as default. So that'll save these choices up here, okay? And that save settings, you'll see that in a number of screens in Sage. So that is your inquiry. I find this to be a very useful screen personally. So, and this checkbox include fully paid transactions. Right now, it's only showing transactions with a balance, but if I want to go back and look at some historical something, you can see we have more data here. Here's a big one, and here's a payment. Current balance is 0. Okay. Makes sense?
Yes, that's great because I'm in here all the time too.
Yeah, most.
And I love the tip about setting the default.
Right. Yep. So, and that, by the way, if you do it in Foundation, you're also going to have to do it in Sky and Asset Management. You're not going to, you'll need to set that for each company,
Okay. Okay.
And that'll save by your user for that company. So that's not going to impact Berlin or John or, anyone else who comes in.
Okay.
1099 inquiry. Okay. So at the end of the year, you're going to look at your 1099 data just to make sure it looks good. So this screen shows your vendor number, the 1099 code, and then it accumulates all your payments made to that vendor for that month, and then the last payment date. And then it's going to show you could have up to 12 lines per vendor if you have, multiple lines. So when you're reviewing your 1099, you can click on print. And then it's going to show you your total for that vendor. Okay. So yeah, in this way you can say, yes, I have a tax ID, I have a withholding state, I have, a tax ID, and I've identified the type, and you can kind of look and see. I can look and see that this is wrong because the Social Security number isn't shaped like this. That's a tax ID, so you can clean that up before you are ready to file. Okay. Yep. Recurring payables is where you would set up things that you pay on a regular basis, like, your rent or your phone, if it's going to be the same every month. So this example shows equipment rental, vendor number 5,000. Remember, we talked about schedules yesterday, so you're going to attach a schedule to it. So unlike an AP invoice that has a date and a posting date, in a recurring payable, you assign a schedule code and a start date. And then it tells you, when my next invoice is, whether it expires. So if you've got any loans or anything that are going to be pretty much the same, you would do that. You would also tell the system if this is a 1099-able item, and then your detail, your expenses will be listed here. Okay. So if that's something that would be helpful to save you some effort, that's always worth doing. Okay, AP transactions. So we talked about batches earlier. Batches are just any block of entries that you do at any one time, that you post into AP and that eventually land in your general ledger. So we'll just review these fields. Actually, I'm going to create a new batch. I'll just call this demo. And I'm going to use vendor 1200. All right, I'm not using a remit to location. So remember, remit to changes the payee name, maybe, and the address. So if you have to send it somewhere else, you would do it there. The document type, invoice, debit note, credit note, interest, you will not have the retainage items, okay? Document number, I'll just make something up. Let's see, is the document on hold? No. By the way, document date, we talked about that earlier, but document date, posting date, usually they're going to be the same. But if you've got an AP invoice that you want to push off to June, so this would be the general ledger date, okay? You could do that, okay? PO and order number are optional. You can put whatever info you want. If this is a 1099-able invoice, you would put that in here. Document total, we'll just say $100. And the 1099 amount's going to be $100. Now we talked about distribution sets, so I want to show you how that works. So what we're going to do is we'll choose this one, and I'm going to create, so my distribution amount, we'll just say it's going to be $100, create distribution. Now it's dividing it because this distribution set is set up for 50%, 20%, and 30%, but of course you can put whatever you want in here. So notice it populated it with the GL account codes. Remember how I said this is how you would get multiple GL account codes to show up so you didn't have to key them in. So it's a little shortcut. You don't have to do it by percentage. You could just say 75 and let's see, 75, 10, and 15. Okay. So that's how a distribution would work. Okay. So we'll hit add. All right. So that's how a distribution set. So once again, you can set those up in AP setup, distribution sets. Now that you've seen it in action, you can see where this one is set up as a fixed percentage, spread evenly, or manual. Most likely you're going to use manual because you're not going to know what percentage it is unless you're spreading it across departments or something like that. So anyway, that's where you set those up. Hopefully that'll save you a little key punching. You know what, my vacuum just came in here, so let me turn that off. When you have 4 corgis, a Roomba is your friend. So, anyway, that's distribution. Trust me, it was the best thing I ever did. So anyway, that's AP, invoice entry. If you're doing a credit note, okay, so I'm going to change my document type to credit note. Notice, let me just make up something here. Notice this field apply to document pops up automatically. So what you want to do with that, if you've got an invoice that you're crediting, whether it's like the vendor offered you a refund or you entered it in wrong and you want to reduce it, you just choose, I'm applying it to this document, okay? And it's going to be, I'm just going to say $10, whatever, and $10 and add. Okay, so that's how to do a credit note. Okay, pretty straightforward. If you can assign it to an invoice, once again, when I hit credit note or debit note, this apply to document field comes up. Your best option is to choose what you're applying it to at that time, if you know. Otherwise, you'll just have an unapplied credit note and you can take it whenever. Okay. So we're not going to add this entry. So let me uncheck that. So here's my little demo batch. I'm going to go ahead and post it. Post it. Okay, now it found some errors. I don't know what the problem is, but anyway, I sent it to the GL. It didn't like something. So what we'll do is we will review how to troubleshoot that. Okay. So here's my error batch from batch 256. So I'm going to choose show posted and deleted. I'm going to go to 256. I'm going to scroll all the way over to the errors column. And that's usually the last column. So I'm scrolling. Number of errors, 1. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to hit print. I'm going to see what I did wrong. Okay, it's a future year, so that's the joy of sample data. I never remember what year I'm in, but anyway, it'll tell you exactly what the problem is, and then you can correct it. Let's see, AP transactions. Okay, so we've talked about invoices. So do you guys usually create a payment batch, or do you manually pick and choose? Do you know?
Manually pick and choose what
you're going to pay.
You know what, Jim has always, we pay as they come in. He's very, he wants things paid promptly. We pay as they come in. We don't usually hold anything.
Okay.
So it's just, yeah.
You just pay it. Okay.
We just pay it.
Yeah, so there's 2, and as one of your vendors, I appreciate that. So there's 2 ways to get a payment out, okay? So the first one is to create a payment batch, where you go in here, you choose your selection code, which we talked about a little earlier, all vendors. What is my payment date? This is going to be my check date. My batch date can be the same, okay? What bank am I using? Okay, you can use the finder. You can see all the banks you have. You might just have one. And then you click on criteria. You have to fill this in. Select by due date. You can say due on or before. And if you're paying everything, what you can do is you can push it out. So maybe I'll say 6/30/2020. All selected documents means everything. And then I'm going to click register, and that's going to show me what I'm about to pay. Okay. And there it is. So there's my pre-check register. So it's called a pre-check register because it's your thing to look at before you actually do your check batch. Okay. Yep.
This is what I was trying to say earlier. The way, right or wrong, this is how I was taught, but the way that I don't use this when I pay invoices.
Okay.
I go into invoice batch list, do new, and do it that way.
So you enter a batch. So the invoice batch list, what that does is it creates a liability. Okay. So then you've got to pay it somehow. So do you then go into a payment batch list?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, got it. So do you do miscellaneous payments for everything? Do you know?
What do you mean? I mean, each one obviously has a vendor and.
Oh, so you do an invoice batch list and then you turn around and do a corresponding check batch list?
I do an invoice batch list and then a payment batch list and then print the check and it's done.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
that's what I was trying to say earlier. That's
okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, yeah, I had a feeling we'd come to whatever you, yeah. So you could create a payment batch automatically rather than one by one by pushing the due on or before out. Okay. So like if you said, pretend it's May 31st, we could say, well, I just want to make sure I pick up everything. So I'm going to push it out to 7/15. I'm going to push it out 45 days. And then I'm going to click register. Then I'm going to click generate. And what that's going to do, it's going to electronically create that batch for you. Okay. Might save you some time. I don't know. You can also, since you guys are super good pays, you probably wouldn't put in an exclusion, but you could if you had like something that you wanted to pay like next week. Instead, you could say, well, exclude vendor ABC. I'm going to pick them up next week. Otherwise, this is going to pick everything that's due on or, before this date. Okay. I'm not actually going to do this because I don't want to pay off my whole sample data. Yeah. But you can see, if I go to the end, it shows my payment amount. And what you can do is you can say, hey, yep, that equals my payment, my invoice batch. And then actually I will create this, but I'll just delete the batch. So I'm just going to say, yep, that looks good. I'm going to hit generate. My batch 33 has been created. Now I'm going to go into payment batch list. And here's my system generated check with 20 entries for $35,000. So that might save you some time to let the computer type them in for you, but that's up to you. I mean, the way you're doing it is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But, if you do it this way, it might save you, a little bit of time. So anyway, at this point, like I said, I'm not actually going to do this because then I'll have a zero balance in my sample data, which would not be good. No. So then the next thing you would do is you would click print post. And then it's going to show you, here's all my checks I'm about to print. And then you click print and it sends it out to Print Boss. It generates your check image, spits it out, you put it in the mail. Okay. So that would be how that works. Again, I'll print it, but I won't accept it. So here's what it looks like. Okay. So here's a check. $558. Yours look different because you're using Print Boss. I'm going to say no because, again, I don't want to wipe out my sample data. But to that point, let's say your printer does jam and your checks didn't print okay. So when you close the screen, it said, do checks print okay? You're going to say either yes or no. If they didn't, then you can tell the system, I'm just hitting the space bar. These guys were not printed because there was a problem. and then you can reprint them. Okay. So my recommendation is always do not close the screen until you've got them in your hand, because if you say yes, they printed okay, it's going to post them. And then the only thing you could do is go and reverse the checks and redo them, which, that's extra step. So that's printing checks. Now, if we get you guys going with EFT, electronics funds, then what you can do is you can do a batch that just has your paper checks and then a batch that has your electronic checks. You could do it that way, but that's just, keep that in mind, for later.
Okay.
Say no, because I actually do not. So I'm going to actually say, do you want to cancel the check run? Yes, because I don't want to post these. Because the next time I have training, I won't have anything to pay. So I'm just going to delete this batch. Now, the other way, which is probably what you're doing, is by picking and choosing what you're paying. So maybe you're working from an aging, or maybe you're working from a batch printout. And then you go into AP payment batch and you just say, check run and whatever today is. And then I'm going to pick vendor 1200. I'm going to hit go, and it's going to list everything that this vendor has outstanding. Now this here, it says pending. That is because I have something posted against that transaction. Maybe it's another payment batch, maybe it's a credit note. But this pending allows me not to double pay things. So I'm going to hit, yes, I'm going to pay this one. I'm going to pay this one. I'm going to pay this one. The total is $1,700. I'm going to hit add. It's complaining about a remit to, but we won't worry about that. And then at that point, then I would print the checks. Okay. So that's how you would pay items that are outstanding. Okay. The other thing you can do is if you get an invoice and you need to get a check out immediately, maybe it's not posted yet. So this is going to be called a miscellaneous payment. Okay. So once again, it's going to be a miscellaneous payment, vendor 1200, invoice number. Notice I'm putting an invoice number in because it's not yet in AP. So we'll make up another number. Put in the GL distribution, $150. And then what's happening is I am creating a check and I'm also hitting the expense. So I'm kind of doing all of it at once. Okay. And then I would just post and print that check. So that's a miscellaneous payment, is to pay something that is not already posted in AP, something that's not in your AP vendor inquiry yet. Okay. A payment, on the other hand, is where you're paying something that does exist for your vendor. Okay. So payment for vendor 1200. Once again, it's going to show what is outstanding. Okay. I'm not going to add that. The other kind of transaction, if you've got a credit note and an invoice and they're not connected to each other, then you can apply that credit note by doing apply document. So we'll just see if 1200 has anything. I don't know if they do. Yes, it looks like there is one that we can use. Yep, so here's a prepayment for $250. And then I can apply it to, for example, these invoices here. Okay. So that's where you've got a plus and a minus, and you just want to marry the two together. Okay. Makes sense?
Yes.
Great. So I won't add that. So those are the kinds, so payments, just to review, you can either enter invoices, post them, You can manually then go in, and when I say manually, I mean you're picking and choosing what you're paying, and you're paying it immediately. You can do that, or you can create a payment batch. Okay, either way works fine. Whichever way makes sense to you is, the best way to do it. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is payment inquiry. So, this is kind of a big screen here. I'm going to maximize here. So, you can narrow the screen down to either a single bank or a single vendor for a date range. So let's say vendor 1200 calls and says, you know what, this thing is past due, what's going on here? So we'll just say, I'm going to look at vendor 1200. Now it takes a minute because every time I type anything, it kind of refreshes the screen. So don't worry about it. See how it's kind of blinking. It's rereading the database and applying what filter I've got to it. So then you can say, all right, I sent you check number 120012 on the 20th. It was 583. Let's see what it paid. I'm going to click document. And once again, it's going to show that it paid invoice number 100-01. Okay. So it's similar to the vendor inquiry, but this is more like just about payments. You can also see that this check is outstanding, or if it cleared, it would say cleared on July 15th, 2020 or whatever. Okay. So that gives you kind of all of that information. So that's your AP inquiry. If I hit open, it's going to show once again, just like a little summary here on what it paid. So it paid document number 100-01. Okay. And of course you can print this out if you want. There's a print button. So if you want to try printing it out, there is my payment inquiry for that vendor. Okay. I don't know if you played with that screen much at all. So this probably isn't going to apply, but control payments is where you can change something about an invoice. So if I go to vendor 1100, oh, that doesn't exist. Let's find one that does. All right, we'll do 1200. So I'm going to change something about a document. Okay. So I'm going to choose this guy right here. Make sure it has a balance. Okay. I'll use this one. Oh, it doesn't have a balance. Well, let's find one that does. Okay, here we are. So I've chosen this invoice. I click go, so it populates all this information. The document total is $1,136.63. So I can either put a payment limit on this, like maybe I'm disputing part of it, but I want to pay some of it. I can also change the due date. Since you guys pay as soon as it comes in, you're probably never going to change the due date because you guys always pay immediately. If you forgot to put a discount in there, you can say, I've got a discount due, and here's the discount date or whatever. And then you would click process and it would change that invoice for you. So again, I don't know that you would ever do this, but this allows you once again to change the due date, the maximum payment, add a discount if you forgot, and then you just click process, or you can put the whole thing on hold. Okay. That's control payments. Do you guys ever do adjustments?
Adjustment batch list. I think we have. I think Berlin has, yes.
Okay. So adjustments can be a little confusing because you've got to kind of make sure you're doing it going the right way. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So vendor. So once again, you're going to choose your vendor. In this example, 1200. You choose the document you're adjusting. It's going to show. Let me just create one. That's going to be a better example. So let's pick out vendor 1200. And we are going to choose a document that has a balance. This is a good one because it has a balance. Okay. All right, it's not letting me do that one. Let me just do, doesn't like that. I'm just going to push it out a little bit. So we're going to choose that one. Really? Okay. We'll just do 5. Complaining because the date's earlier, the adjustment date's earlier than the invoice date, which you can't do, obviously. Okay, so it's showing me my document balance here. And so that's, kind of your information up here. And then down here is what's going to happen. So you choose, I'm going to adjust this account number 6,000. And what am I doing to 6,000? I'm going to reduce my invoice. So I'm going to get rid of $100 here. So the debit and credit here is what you're doing to this GL account. Okay. So this is where people get confused. I'm debiting or crediting payables. So just remember, it's what you're doing to the account you've selected. All right. I'm going to hit the insert. So now it's showing me my payables adjustment total. I'm debiting payables, which reduces it by $100. And then my other expense accounts, it's, credits of $100. So as long as you kind of keep your eyeballs down here and look at what it's about to do to payables, that's going to help you keep straight. And the other thing, if you remember, that what you're doing up here is what's going to happen to that account. So I am debiting 6,000 I'm crediting account 6,000, which is going to reduce an expense account, meaning I'm going to debit AP, which is going to reduce my liability.
You know what? I've been in here when I need to void a check and not rewrite it.
Yep.
And I've had to do the adjustments.
Yep.
So I have been in here. Yep.
Yep. So then if you come, let's see. I don't think it, yeah. So basically, what you want to do is just keep your eye on what's happening to AP, and that'll keep you straight. Because like I said, it's really easy, to end up, you're adjusting it $100, but you actually increased it by 2, now you're out $200, right?
I do that stuff all the time.
Yeah, you and everybody.
Yeah.
Which is why I like to make a point of, this is what's happening to this account. What's happening AP is below. Okay. Yeah. Now, the other thing you could do for that is you could just use credit note, and then you're reducing it by virtue of the fact that it's a credit note.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So either one will get you there. Okay. So either one is fine. It's a matter of what's your personal preference. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So that's that. And then post batches. I mean, I work everything from the batch list screens, because I can add a batch, I can post a batch, I can print a batch, I can do everything. But if you want to use this feature, it's going to post only things that are set as ready to post. Okay. So that's what I prefer the batch list, because I can see everything that I need to do.
Okay.
All right. So that is transactions. So now let's look at transaction reports. So batch listing is just a printout of your batch. You can also print that out from the batch list, which is another reason I like the batch list screen, because it just makes sense to me. Batch status, You can do this for invoice payment or adjustment. It just shows you what batches you've created, what ones are posted, what ones are deleted. Now you can see, sample data doesn't have a whole lot, but my guess is you're probably not really going to use this one a lot, but that's what it does. It just gives you the status of your batches, okay? Posting journals, this shows you what actually did get posted into AP. Again, people don't always print these, but you certainly can, okay? Check register is exactly what it sounds like. So let's just print that out.
I've used that quite often.
Yep. So there's your, tells you, your vendor number, your document number, vendor, bank, etc. Okay. So that's a useful screen. GL transactions should always be blank. So since you've got your system set to auto post, you won't have anything in GL transactions. This would be populated if your option was to create batches or GL batches upon request. Another DOS leftover. Why would anyone want this? I don't know, because it's an extra step. Okay. Posting errors. So you can post the posting errors report from the batch list by double clicking on the error column for that batch that had the problem to find out why you had a problem, or you can print it here. Okay. So the most common are like fiscal period is locked, or net invoice doesn't equal, that kind of thing. It'll tell you exactly why didn't this batch post. So that's a helpful report. So you don't have to just guess. Vendor transactions are exactly what it sounds like. They are a listing of your vendor transactions. So you can select by vendor number, vendor group, or short name. Let's just do vendor number. We'll do good old 1200. You can do for a date range if you wish, okay, or forever. And then you can sort. So if you're doing multiple vendors, you could choose how you want to sort. Like maybe you want the balance by balance or by vendor group or whatever. Those are your options. You can include this extra data space for comments, vendors with a zero balance. I don't know why you'd want that, but you could. Totals by transaction type might be useful. So it would give you a subtitle at the end of invoice, debit note, credit note, etc. Apply details. I'll show you the difference. So here is just as it is. Okay. Just going to list by document date. I'm on. All right, so here we are. We've got invoice. So it tells me the document type invoice, payment, and the date, the due date, what batch this was used in, whether it's overdue, transaction amount, and its balance. Okay. If I choose applied details, it's going to show the applied details. So you'll see what that looks like. It makes it longer for sure. So you can see invoice 100-01. Here's my amount, and here's a payment, and here's another payment. So it matches those payments to the invoice. Okay. Fully paid transaction is going to show exactly what it says. Fully paid transactions. You can elect to only show invoices, or, if you want to narrow down your selection, you can sort by type. So I'm going to uncheck all this. So it'll show my invoices together, my payments together. So it's just going to change how you're sorting your so you can see invoice, it's sorting like that. Okay. So that's your vendor transactions. And again, you can do it by date if you want to see everything you've done in the year. I've got a lot of not-for-profits, and sometimes they'll say, let me see my invoices for a vendor for a year so I can know who to hit up for a donation. I've had people ask me for that. So that makes that easy for them to do.
Mhm.
Aged payables. So once again, you guys enter it, then you pay it. So your aging is probably usually maybe going to be 0, but I'll go through it with you anyway. So age payables by due date, you give it your aging date. That's going to dictate what the columns, what shows up in what column. Okay. Cut off by what? Document date, posting date, or year and period. So if you are carrying a balance in your AP and you're wanting to compare it to your general ledger, you're going to want to cut off by either posting date or year period, because posting date is your GL date, as is year period. So if you have a situation where you've got an invoice that's dated October, but your GL date is November, then you're going to want to cut off by posting date so that you won't be wondering why your GL doesn't tie to your detail. Again, you guys pay everything as you go, so this isn't quite as critical. Your AP is usually around 0, unless you've entered invoices and it's the 31st, and so you can see here's my aging. Okay, so you can just, and we keep going, and there's my grand total of what's outstanding. And it's got a little key here. Now again, with you guys paying, this is probably less likely to be an issue. But if you did carry an AP balance, you'd want to make sure when you're comparing to the general ledger, you want to make sure you choose vendors and transactions on hold. Because if you've got a transaction that you've entered, but it's on hold, it still has hit the general ledger. So if you don't check that, your GL and your detail are going to be out, and you're going to have trouble figuring out why. So let's see if there's an example of an on-hold transaction and sample data. There is not, but if there were, you would see a little H beside the line, like a little H. Okay. Now, earlier in our session today, we talked about how we wanted to age credit notes and prepayments, and the selection was current. That would just show here. Okay, so see, this is a credit note, and you can see it's aged in the current column because it's a credit note. Okay. So that's what that does. Again, with you guys, it's not going to be as critical, as maybe someone else. Periodic processing, create GL batch you're not going to use because you're letting the system create your GL batch when you post. Clear history. This is where you'd clear history. I don't really suggest you do that because once it's gone forever. Amen. So, unless you had such an enormous database that everything was taking forever to print and stuff like that, then you might want to do it. But with the level of activity you guys have, you've got plenty transactions, but they're spread across multiple companies. So this isn't as big of an issue. Year end, most people don't bother with it. It just resets your batches to 1, and like why? I don't really see the point personally, but you could if you wanted. Delete inactive records. If you've got inactive vendors, vendor groups, remit to, or recurrings that have been made inactive, you can delete them. Once they're gone forever. You can't delete an inactive vendor if they have history, though. Okay, so just be aware of that. Clear statistics, again, I don't see any reason to ever do this personally, because like I said, once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
Create recurring payables, however, you might want to do. So if you've set up recurring payables, this is where you would create a batch of recurring payables. So if you've got like your internet or your phone or something that's always the same, what you would do is you would set that up under vendors. You create your recurring payable, and then you would choose your run date, and then you'd hit process. So what's going to happen is it's going to create a transaction based on that schedule for everything that's due. So if you've got a recurring payable, and you haven't run it in 3 months and it's set for monthly, it's going to give you 3 transactions. Okay. One thing to be aware of with any recurring transaction in Sage, whether it's a general ledger or AP batch, if you create it and then regret that you created, if you delete it, you can't rerun it for the same date. The reason for that is that in your vendors, recurring payables. So we'll pull this one up. So it knows that it was last, the next invoice date, like I haven't run this because it's sample data, but it would know the date of last generation, and therefore it wouldn't do it again for that same date. Okay, so it protects you from accidentally paying your rent twice, for example. So, if you run a recurring payable and you need to change it, just edit it in the batch. Once you've created the recurring payable, it just creates, I'll just show you what it does. So let's do one. Whoops, let me go to the right place here. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to my AP periodic processing. I'm going to create recurring payable batch. I'm going to do it as of January 2020. All vendors. I'm going to hit process. I don't know what we're going to get. We're probably going to get a lot. So, okay, so we got 69 invoices. So you can see how fast that was. That will save you time if it's like your rent every month. You might want to do that. So here's my recurring payables. You can see. And you can see here they all are. So, we've got all these transactions, because it hasn't probably never been done. So anyway, now if I go back to my vendors, AP vendors, recurring payables, if I go back, now it's going to show that it was last generated. It was last generated, my next invoice date. This is a weekly transaction, so that's why the dates are kind of odd. But it was last generated for 1/27/2020. My next invoice date. Notice these are not editable fields. So, you want to pay attention to your dates when you run these things. So that's recurring. Hopefully, maybe that'll help you, save some time. So that is everything you wanted to know and more about accounts payable. So do you have any questions now?
That was a lot of stuff, Carol.
I know, it was a lot. So you may want to digest, and next week we've got a session, we can start with Q&A, and then we're just doing the bank rec is all we're doing next week.
Okay. A lot of that stuff was familiar because that's what we use.
What you've been doing for 100 years. Yep.
But there is some things that that we don't do. but so I'm glad you showed them to us. So
yeah. So if there are any things that kind of made you think, hey, this could save me some time, we can dive deeper into those.
Okay.
At another time, or we can hopefully save you some time and maybe some effort. Now for John's benefit, Sage 300 uses crystal reports. Any reports that you need written that you don't have, between Sage Intelligence and crystal reports, we can probably get that done for you. So next week we're going to look at bank rec, which isn't going to be a full 2 hours. So I thought we'd look at Sage Intelligence at that time as well, just to wet your whistle on that product, because it's pretty great. It's the way you can drop any Sage data into Excel. So people like that. So we'll look at that next time.
And that's called Sage Intelligence?
Sage Intelligence, yep.
Okay.
Yep, we'll talk about that. I mean, I could do it now, but my guess is you probably had enough.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah, you're done. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. We hit all the functionality, so yeah, that takes a while. So we didn't talk about Atrix. We can talk about that another time. That's the 1099 processing. That one we might want to get Berlin on for that. We can talk about bank rec, and we can talk about bank feeds, and we can see if we can save you some time with that.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. And this is we're on for Tuesday, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect.
Sure are. Okay, well, if you have any questions, you can either send them to me, and I can email you my responses, or we can do a little Q&A on Tuesday, because the bank rec isn't going to take 2 hours.
Okay.
So, all right.
All right, that sounds good. John, you okay? You have any questions?
None yet, but again, I'm sure they'll come up as I dive in.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm here. So,
yep.
Hopefully this was useful for you too, Felicia.
It has been. It has been. John, good. I did want to tell you that Carol has written a number of different reports that we've needed over the years for us. So, for various things.
Yep.
What she just mentioned, she has done that for us before. So
excellent.
Yeah, like your foundation report. And yep.
Certain, only need certain pieces of information and blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah. So, I mean, Sage comes with the canned reports, but I've yet to run into a client that didn't need something a little unique to them.
Sure.
Like, your foundation report, like another client who's in construction is not going to need to know about donors,
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, you guys have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk next week. If you've got questions, you can either just start accumulating them, or we can, you can send them to me or whatever.
Okay, that sounds great. Have a good weekend, Carol.
Hey, you too. Stay well.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks,